Welcome back to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, his church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison.
My name is Brandon Bonner.
And we'll be your host. All right, so this episode, we're going to be diving into, I think, one of the most concerning issues that we're facing right now in culture for Christians, and that is living in this hypersexualized world. We cannot get away from it because it is because of technology. I've spoken many times about this. You know, we're carrying around the world in our back pockets, so it is a much different world. Accessing highly explicit sexualized content back when I was growing up was virtually impossible. I mean, it was, you had to go to the library and, get a National Geographic. For those of you that don't know, it was a magazine that like went over the world and just, had, and sometimes, there was a tribal people that didn't have a top on. I mean, that was the basically the best that we could do. And so today that is just a much different picture of that when you talk about not only nudity, but like explicit stuff that's out there. And then from this cultural standpoint, being pushed on our younger and younger people and being identifying them, their self-worth, and all of the stuff that we've talked about too in the past of self-identity is caught up in this hypersexualized world that we're in now. So it's a quagmire. It's a mess that we're in right now, and I think it's something that is worth discussing. So I want to talk a little bit about how did we get to this place, like this drift that has taken place. And I think it's important to note that this isn't something that happened overnight, because I think if it did, it would never have happened in the first place. It's such a drastic thing. So the classic frog in the kettle boiling. And so as an example, one of the things that I found that was very interesting was that in 1939, when this movie called Gone with the Wind came out, audiences were absolutely blown away, shocked beyond shock to hear Rhett Butler, when he, towards the end of the movie, says to Scarlett O'Hara, he says, frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a D. And he uses the D word. I'm going to say damn is the word that he uses. Because I don't know, the people, what the D word, what's the D word? Dog? But he said that. And there were a lot of theaters at that time that would not even carry the movie because he used that word. And of all people, Hollywood, these are the liberal elites of the day, they had a problem with it. So this was a big deal. And I think about that now in terms of where we're at today, comparatively speaking, which you obviously know. I mean, using the D word in a movie is it's nothing, right? I mean, there's movies that will drop the F-bomb. I was looking at one the other day. I mean, the count was like 300 times in a movie. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it's not just the language anymore that has gone so far. It's the explicit nature. It's the nudity. It's all of the stuff. So we're in a place that is vastly different than where we were back when Rhett Butler and the Gone with the Wind was considered vulgar.
Yep.
And I pulled up, I think you've got a chart there that I think is interesting.
Yeah, so this is from Decoys of Deception by Jimmy Sides, so hopefully you can see this here. But, the lighter bars are the church from a morality standpoint, and the darker one's the worldview. And you can see over the past 20 years, of course, there's been a decline on kind of the margin of morality, but you can see present day the church is actually lower than the worldview morality was 20 years and really in line with where we were at 10 years ago. And so I think this, tells a story as Christians, have we adjusted our morality, and I think that maybe the better words become more desensitized to, this hypersexualized culture. Films, movies, TV shows, music, all those things are more explicit, more acceptable. And so I think that we've just fallen as victim to become, desensitized to that content.
Yeah, and I guess the question I have is why? Like why I mean, I understand the this conviction by repetition kind of stuff. Is it just pervasive, and we see it all the time. And I understand how desensitization works, but I'm wondering what happened to the guardrails, like especially from the Christian standpoint. Like what happened to Christians? Brandon, this just occurred to me. This may be related to our last episode of just not being loud enough and vocal enough, and allowing this stuff to enter into our homes and just slowly over time drifting and becoming okay with it.
Yep. Well, I think there's a financial component to it. Like this content sells, right? I mean, this is movies, social media algorithms. It all is I think there's a monetary component. I think as Christians we have, we've done the same thing. We watch the movies, we watch the TV shows, we listen to the music. I'm not saying I watched movies and TV shows and so this stuff is obviously in that content, and so in a way we are all contributing to the production of that material. And then you really get into, and I think we're going to cover this later in the year, but then really you get into, as Christians, is it okay for us to consume that type of media?
Yeah. When I'm looking at this, I think that, man, I feel like I harp on technology so much. Like I seriously, I feel like a broken record. But we have to wake up and realize we are in very different times with technology. Just in the last 10 years, it's become pervasive. And I say this from a very experiential standpoint. I want everybody listening to listen very carefully to this, because this isn't some theory in a textbook. This is me actually tracking data as a campus minister over almost 13 years, dealing with college students. And part of this, the reason I was doing this, well, first of all, was because of my background. Is I kept data, because you never know when you're going to need data. But the other part of it ended up going into a book that I wrote that covers this very thing, which is it's this. I was asking every college student that came in, and I'm talking the population sample here were hundreds, if they had been exposed to or viewed pornography. And I define pornography as explicit sexual material where there's full nudity and acts of sexualized nature taking place. And if they had been exposed to that or viewed it, and if so, at what age? And I was expecting, probably 40% to say, no, I haven't seen it. Listen, 100% of every college student that I talked to over 13 years of campus ministry had been exposed to pornography. 100%. And so when I talk about the ubiquitous nature of a hypersexualized culture, this is what I'm talking about. And technology is what has made this possible. Mm-hmm. So when I say that we're living in very different times, I'm speaking specifically to what has happened. There was a lady that wrote a book. I wish I could remember it right now, but she was doing a conference, and she was talking about technology and how it's changed our cultural landscape, and it's changed families, it's changed marriages. And a woman asked her as a question and answer after her seminar. She said, "When is the appropriate age to give my children cell phones?" And her response back to this woman was, "When you want them to see pornography, because it's going to happen." And I proved that in the data that I kept. And here's the even more terrifying thing that the average age that children, these college students, said that they first saw pornographic images was age 9.
Mm.
Age 9. So parents that are listening to this, if you have a child in your home who has access to technology, and you may have put every type of restrictive measure in the home, when they leave your home and they are around other kids in school or in the library or wherever it is, they have access to the stuff that you might have locked down. And they, odds are, I'm not going to say 100%, but I'm going to tell you that the high percentage of kids that are 9 or over have seen pornography.
Yeah, and I think that's I think there's a lot of things feeding that, right? You think about, I mean, it's an entire industry, and social media definitely monetizes that, and algorithms feed off of it.
Yep.
And so, we're kind of moving as a culture from a limited exposure. Your generation, you have to really seek it, and
Right.
and potentially like go to a store and National Geographic to now.
Yeah.
I mean, it is at your fingertips at
Right.
any time.
Right.
And so, kind of combining this with our other kind of point of culture and media has kind of desensitized us to some of these things, and maybe that's bled into creating an issue, with
Because
pornography
it absolutely has,
yeah.
because it's made it okay. It's made it acceptable.
Right.
The hookup culture, as we talked about a little bit about last episode, definitely feeds in that. Like there used to be like a kind of like a shame or an embarrassment,
Right.
Females especially, they didn't touch that stuff. I found in campus ministry that when I started, it was about 30% of college students, females had viewed it, and as I continued that, it turned out that the females were viewing it just as much as the guys were.
Yeah. And so I think it's important for us to talk about really quickly, what is our response as Christians, as a church, as individuals? Like how do we respond? What do we stop consuming all of this media? Is that the approach? Do we inform our next generation, our children, for those of our listeners that have them? Do we help inform them, put guardrails in place? So, because we know it's inevitable that they're going to view it. Like, what is our response? Like, what should we do? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So part of my master's thesis was dealing with this issue. What do you do? The first thing that I've told parents to do is you talk about it, and that's the biggest mistake, is they're not talking about it because they don't know that it's happening. And so the first thing is to wake up and understand the reality of the situation is, no matter how much you try to protect your kid from it, they're living in a world right, and unless you just move to an island or something like that, there's definitely things that can delay that exposure. I think part of it is, when you hand a kid a cell phone, you're giving them access to the world, and that takes a tremendous amount of self-discipline. And children don't have self-discipline. I'm sorry to say that, they don't. And they reach an age where they're naturally curious about sex. So they're going to find it. They're going to look at it. And what they're going to open up is way more than what they bargained for. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be exposed to things that are going to change them psychologically, because they're not, the child brain is not set up or geared to view the type of stuff that they're going to be exposed to. It's just not. And there's long-term studies on that now that are showing conclusive evidence that changes the neurological pathways. I counsel some young men who have struggled with porn addiction since they were 12, and men that are now in marriages that literally cannot be sexually intimate with their wives because they've rewired their brain structure for pornography. So there's a lot of really insidious, wicked things that happens from that. So back to your question, the first thing is really thinking long and hard about when you give your child access to that. But before that, way before that, like I'm talking about 6 years old, if you want to trust the research, and I do on this, you begin having conversations with your kids about what's out there. Because at 6, as soon as they're in the school system, they're going to be hearing about it, and they're probably going to start seeing pictures because their best friend is going to be bringing in something, on their phone that they saw their mom or dad or whoever looking at, and so it's going to get spread that way. If you don't believe me, talk to teachers. Teachers will tell you the same thing, that it's there. It's in the school system. They're going to see it. So you have to start talking and preparing your kids, telling them what sex is, what it looks like in a good, healthy relationship, sharing with them the biblical foundation of that. And it's not a one-time conversation. It's not the old-time, 1950s birds and bees conversation that's awkward and the dad takes their son out and says, well, son, let me tell you about how babies get here. And then you never have a conversation about sex once again. This is something that needs to be happening frequently. And the research, again, it cites that. And yes, it's awkward, but it will become less awkward the more you talk about it.
Yep. And what about, media consumption? I'm thinking about like these movies that have explicit content, TV shows.
Well, we were talking a little bit before about, the technology is good in this part because you can have
VidAngel,
I think. They're not one of our sponsors, but maybe they need to be. That you can watch some. There's some really good shows out there, but unfortunately, they're loaded out with nudity and bad language, and so there's programs out there that can edit all of that stuff out, and you still it doesn't change the narrative of the show that you're watching. It doesn't.
Yep. Yeah, I think it is important for us to talk about. It's something that I to be completely honest and transparent here on the podcast, I'll say it. I watch TV shows and movies, and I've watched TV shows and movies that have explicit content, and I don't even think about it. Yeah. It's like, it's just that's what it is. That's TV.
Talking about like the language piece of it, the F-bombs. I know a lot of Christians that they don't see an issue with that. They don't see a problem with it. And I would encourage them to reevaluate, the stuff that you hear, if it's vulgar language, if it's considered, the scripture talks about oil and vinegar, and there's certain things that don't mix. And if you are a Christian and hopefully the Spirit indwells in you, that the type of worldly vulgar language is not going to be part of your makeup. And the more you listen to that, I've talked to other Christians who we've had a conversation, and the F-bomb has accidentally just popped out of their mouth. And they're like, whoa, did I just say that? I'm like, yeah, you did. Like, man, I attribute that, and they attribute it to just being exposed to it all the time.
So moving into the next point here, for sake of time. So in previous generations, sexuality was a behavior, but now maybe it's more of an identity. Culture teaches us our desires define you, and to question your sexual expression is to question your own personhood. So, and suppression of those feelings and desires equates to harm. And so, as Christians, kind of what's your thought on that? How we should approach that?
Well, I think we've talked about that quite a bit before, just about our identity is rooted in Christ. And, if we're listening to the world to tell us who we are, and obviously it's such a sad thing that's happening right now with this obscurity of personhood. And what I mean by that is that you've got millions of prepubescent girls, and I say girls specifically because they're the ones most impacted by this, the research shows, who feel like their self-worth is directly related to how many views or likes that are being received. And so the unfortunate thing is that the pattern that they're seeing there is that likes, that affirmation that they receive online is ratcheted up the more provocative pictures of themselves that they post. And so when we talk about this hypersexualized culture, that's digging down now deeper into the psychology piece of it. And it's showing that the adolescent girl's identity is so entwined and wrapped up with the comparison that they see other friends getting more likes than they, and they look at the pictures that they're posting. Why is my friend Susie getting all these likes? Well, Susie's posting her, and these are young girls. These are 12, 13, 14-year-old girls posting images of themselves that, quite frankly, are shocking. And it's so pervasive now that I see even amongst a lot of Christians, as those girls age, showing so much that is like there's not a lot left to the imagination. Even in family photos, or vacation pictures and stuff. It's so pervasive. And we've just gotten so desensitized to it that we don't see any harm in it because everybody's doing it. And we don't want to be the weird people with, the full garments to go into the ocean. I'm going to mention it. But in all seriousness, the damage that's being done is what's happening behind the scenes that we don't see in the girls' bedrooms when they're thinking about how do I post this picture and get the likes. And so what's happening now is this has become a mental health crisis. And because of this, you see the suicide rates in these demographics increasing exponentially, really. And that's happened. You can mark it when Facebook came out. You saw an uptick in adolescent girls and mental health issues, and then you saw it again when Instagram gets released. And so it matches up the prevalence of mental health issues and suicidal ideation ratchets up at the release dates of these social media platforms that are taking place. Yep. And that's not a coincidence.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about on some previous episodes. We have to talk more about, especially to, really to everyone, about who we're made in the image of. Where's our value? What are we worshiping? Those are all important conversations to have and really root ourselves back. And even if you're older, like, that maybe you're not, I'm not posting on Instagram, but like even if you're in my age, my generation, these are still good reminders because I think that it's so easy to get attached to the physical nature, how I look, what I wear, what I drive, what kind of house I have. It kind of all is connected, and I think can create a lot of issues because again we're placing our image, our own self-worth and identity in things that are not eternal, not spiritual. They're all things that are transient.
I'd love to see a movement because again, speaking about technology, it can be used for evil, it can be used for good. I'd love to see a movement of young people re-embracing a more I hate to use this label, but like just a more conservative approach to how they present themselves to the world. There used to be this thing, modest is hottest kind of thing. I mean, why can't it be? Like, why can't that be a cool thing now where instead of posting extremely provocative images, they're posting things that highlight who they are uniquely as a person, not what their physical body looks like. And I think that the time is right for more and more of our young people to start embracing that and rejecting what the world says this is who you are, a body part, how you look in a bikini, how you look even more naked. That's not helpful, and it leads to long-term mental damage for our young people.
Yep. So last point here, and to close this out. So the deeper issue here is not about movies or media or what we're posting. It's about worship. Humans, we're wired for desire, and when our desire for God weakens, other desires can expand beyond those boundaries, and so you really think about a hypersexualized culture. Is it something that's primarily about sex, or is it misplaced worship?
Yeah, that's a very thought-provoking idea there, because I think when we define the term worship, And I like to think about this is what are the things that we idolize, and I see. I'm going to use Taylor Swift as an example here. Um, I think she's a talented girl. Obviously, she has some skill because she's a billionaire now. I think sold a ton of stuff. But when you pause and you look at all of these young girls that are losing their mind when she walks onto stage. And if you don't like Taylor Swift, I mean, look at the old clips of the Beatles or Elvis Presley and girls passing out, people fainting, people losing consciousness because this person who has some level of celebrity status walks up. That's the definition of worship. Mm-hmm. They're literally worshiping this person. They're falling at their feet, okay? Why are we giving that level of devotion to any human being? It's insanity. And I get it. I mean, celebrities. I've seen some celebrities here and there. I see them all the time in airports. I take pictures of them. You guys don't think it's that person, but I'm pretty sure it is.
No, he doesn't. I've seen the pictures. They're not celebrities.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's cool to see somebody that's famous, that has celebrity status, that everybody knows. But at the end of the day, they have zero impact on my life. They're not going to get me to heaven. And as a matter of fact, they may work to get me to the other place if I am devoting that amount of worship to them. And so here again is this idea then, if you're bringing up this worship, is are we worshiping our bodies? Has our bodies and the amount of likes that we get for showing our bodies to everybody, has that become our new Canaanite god that we're offering up, that we're sacrificing ourselves up to these new gods? And I think it's a dangerous place for us to be. And I think as Christians, specifically as Christians parents, if you're a parent listening to this episode needs to really resonate with you loud and clear. And I would probably guess that there's some corrections that need to be made. If you haven't already done it, they need to be made. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it is our responsibility. Like, let's start having this discussion and this conversation, not just on the podcast, but in your local communities. I mean, these are fair, thought-provoking questions that I don't know if there's a clear answer on. I mean, I think you could get an answer from Scripture, but I don't know of any Scripture saying if media has sexual content, don't watch it. Like, that's not going to be verbatim what Scripture says. But I think it's important for us to talk about these things and study, because I think there is a lot of Scripture that can talk about, avoiding temptation and desires and how you can eliminate that. And those are hard conversations because this is entertainment, right? We all work a full day and go home, and what do you want to do? You want to unwind and get some form of entertainment. And when we consistently consume that every day, then it really can take over, and it can become an idol without us even recognizing it.
One of the things, too, as we close this show out, that has always bothered me, and this probably should be an episode all by itself, but it's definitely related to this. We talk about being provocative images, sexualized images, that kind of thing. And the girls today wearing things that are, not explicit, but they're revealing. And being a guy and being a young person at one point, knowing how that can be distracting for a young man, okay? And so these battle lines have been drawn amongst Christians. And I've heard Christian mothers saying, well, your son can choose not to look at that. And so that's just a really weird thing for me. Like, you're okay with your daughter with a skirt that's so short that if she bends over, you're going to see everything that she's got, and tops that are cut so low. And there's probably if there's young people listening, they're going, oh my goodness, what a old fashioned
boomer.
Right. And I'm not a boomer, but it's like, let's just all wake up for a second and realize how far we've drifted. Mm-hmm. And understand a little bit. You don't have to understand a lot, just a little bit about biology and what happens in puberty and the curiosity and hormones going crazy, and you're going to be okay with your 12, 13, 14-year-old daughter looking like Julia Roberts did in Pretty Woman, okay? And, I'm not going to say the word there because I'd probably offend people, but you're dressing your daughter or allowing your daughter to dress up like what just a few years ago was considered to be a streetwalker, okay? And think that the guys need to control themselves and not look at her because, you have agency over your body. That's a weird place that we're at right now.
Yep.
And that's just a side tangent that's related to this. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we could talk about it because I actually think that there is merit on both ends. I think it is important for us as a 27-year-old male who wasn't young too long ago, teaching respect and approach to women and self-control. I mean, I think that's a fair conversation.
Absolutely, yeah.
To have with a young man. But at the same time, like, don't if you have a daughter, it's the same conversation. Self-control, like, dress appropriately, but I think there's definitely I feel like, and this is, again, I didn't grow up in the church, so this is just my initial perception. We're going way over time, but yeah. I do think that we use that as a crutch a little bit. Like, well, he's just a man or a boy, he's going to have, and I get that. I mean, I'm a guy. So, but I also think that those are conversations we also need to have with men, young men, of like, hey, this is things that you're going to encounter, right? You're going to be exposed to this. And you need to understand, how do you approach this? Respectful boundaries, how can you flee from this temptation? Accountability partners, church community, like, these are all tools that you can provide, to help abstain from this.
Yeah, and as we wrap this up, the idea that I'm thinking here is that we've taken the human physique, the form, and we've sexualized it to a point now where it's truly explicit, and so we're objectifying our images. Mm-hmm. Which is not what we're supposed to do, okay? And so women are telling men, I don't objectify me, yet they're dressing themselves in ways that make it really hard, not because it's like, what are you showing the world? Like, what's the statement there when you dress so provocatively? Like, why are you exposing those parts? Well, I mean, because those are body parts, and so you are objectifying yourself on that. And so I think everybody needs to just pull back from that and understand where we're at as a society, why we're here, which, we've talked about that from the technology piece, and realize we're being used by Satan. Mm-hmm. And he's just sitting back and he's laughing at all of us because we're right where he wants us to be on this. So speaking of provocative, this has been a provocative discussion. And yeah, we probably will circle back to this because there's these side tangents here that I didn't even realize we were going to get into that are probably worth exploring a little bit more. Folks, thanks for listening to another podcast of The Lion, the Way, and the Word. Shout out to our sponsors, Central Church of Christ, for providing this incredible studio. Ministry League, there you can see on your screen if you're listening on or watching on YouTube. You can see that there. We're on all the Spotify and all the other, I don't know what they're called, the podcast,
Apple Podcasts,
YouTube, yeah, all the stuff, you can find us there. Until our next episode of The Lion, the Way, and the Word, be kind to one another, love one another, and remember, the Creator of the universe loves you so much that He gave up His only Son for you. Have a blessed day.